episode 136 of the CRICKETher Weekly. Apologies because I'm actually a bit croaky this morning because we were at the Cricket Society Autumn Awards lunch yesterday and I was comparing and there was a lot to say, there were a lot of awards to present and I did a lot of talking consequently. So yes, you can probably hear in my voice I am a bit croaky. It's not COVID, as far as I know. It's not a cold, as far as I know. It's just general croakiness. Anyway, it was a really nice afternoon at the awards lunch and there were 2 women's awards in particular that we should probably mention as it's the CRICKETher Weekly.
Definitely.
So one of them went to Charlie Dean. She was given the most promising young female cricketer. Young is a kind of a catch-all term for anyone under the age of about 25, I think. So that was on the back of really strong performances, in particular in the 2021 season when she, of course, made her England debut.
And we'll pop a picture of that up here. And there is Charlie Dean looking a lot like Emily Windsor, because, of course, Emily Windsor collected the award on her behalf.
Okay, yeah, she did. So that was nice. Southern Vipers teammates and all that. And then there is also now a Cricket Society Charlotte Edwards Award because Charlotte Edwards is one of the Cricket Society vice presidents. And so we've named an award in her honour and it is for the best under-16 schoolgirl cricketer of the year. And that went to Davina Perrin, who people may be familiar with because she was the youngest player selected to play in the 100 at the age of just 15 this summer. She's also obviously had some really good regional performances for Central Sparks and she's just been selected in the under-19 World Cup squad to go to South Africa in January, so she was very excited about that.
Yeah, we were talking to her about that, weren't we?
Yeah.
She's really looking forward to it. They've got lots of training coming up at Loughborough, I believe. And then they're off at the very beginning of next year and they're obviously, all of the girls are just like over the moon to be just part of this trip. They're all really excited, so it's fantastic to see. It was also particularly great to have Davina Perrin there because of course she brought down the average age by about 30 years of the Cricket Society.
Probably more than that. Yeah, it was great. And actually the inaugural winner of the Charlotte Edwards Award was Alice Capsey, so you know it's a bit of a tough act to follow there. Good luck, Davina Perrin. No, it was a really nice day, wasn't it, Sid? And we also had, it was quite interesting because we had Alex Stewart, because it was at the Oval, so Alex Stewart was the guest speaker, and he did about 15 minutes and then took some questions from the audience, and there was a particular theme that dominated that conversation, wasn't there, Sid?
Yeah, they talked quite a lot about the 100, didn't they? And it's safe to say that the 100 is not popular with the Cricket Society's audience. I guess that's no surprise. They skew kind of towards the older end of the spectrum, shall we say, and they're very much traditional people. A lot of county fans there, so you know they're looking particularly at the impact of the tournament on counties. And Alex Stewart, of course, who was kind of we met him. I'd never met him before. Thoroughly bloody nice bloke.
So nice.
Such a humble guy as well. Considering what a great cricketer he was. Anyway, obviously now he's kind of in charge of the men's team at Surrey, and you know his interests are in the Surrey County Championship men's team, and you know he was kind of forthright. I was actually really surprised for one of the kind of top people at Surrey. He basically said in not quite so many words that he wants the 100 abolished. At the very least, he wants the tournament substantially reduced to maybe 2 or 3 weeks, which would obviously make a huge difference to the 100. Now, this has been a bit of a theme over the last few weeks because of the response of the men's counties to the Andrew Strauss review, which was a load of proposals for trying to put the men's team in a better position vis-a-vis its international competitors. One of the responses of the counties has been to go, can we leverage this to try and get rid of the 100 again? We've got the 1.3 million and that was great, but we're not actually massively keen on this 100 thing because it's shutting us out for the whole of August, which is such a key month. And so Alex Stewart was saying basically that the men's counties would like August back, really. Yeah. But of course there's an impact on the women's game, isn't there, Raf? Yeah, no, there is, absolutely. And there was a question about the women's game right at the end, and Alex Stewart, said, and we know Surrey have been really supportive of women's cricket, and he actually said, oh, well, the 100's been really good for women's cricket, and there was kind of raucous applause in the room at that. And that is such a frequent reaction to when you talk to people about the 100, and they say, oh, the only good thing about it is that it's helped advance women's cricket. The problem with that is you can't split the two things very easily. You can't say, oh, well, I support it for the women and not the men. And I really feel that
there's been it's quite difficult for women's cricket. It's put women's cricket in a difficult situation because it's almost put women's cricket at the heart of a kind of culture clash within English cricket between the traditionalists and those who want to modernise. And the 100 is obviously a kind of project of the modernisers, and women's cricket has been placed at the heart of that. Perhaps actually sort of almost accidentally, because we know about the double headers being a kind of happy accident of COVID, etc. But it almost feels like women's cricket now is kind of caught in the crossfire between these two factions in cricket, and that's a really unhealthy place for women's cricket to be in. We never want our sport or our section of cricket to be kind of being fought over and being tussled over, and to have to kind of it's almost like the future of women's cricket has now been tied to the success of the 100, which is a project that half of English cricket fans don't want to succeed, and that's really difficult.
Yeah, we've totally rebuilt the pyramid of women's cricket, essentially based around the 100. I mean, I know in theory the Vipers and the Southern Brave aren't the same thing, but in practice we've rebuilt women's cricket around the pillars of the 100, and now that it's apparent that there are significant forces within the game as a whole, which basically means a load of people in the men's game, because they're the people with the key votes. The people with the key votes in the ECB are the professional men's counties, and they want to tear it down now. And where does that leave women's cricket? I don't know. And I just, I mean, I was definitely not one of the voices supporting the 100 at the beginning, but I've enjoyed the cricket and I've enjoyed what it's become. And but it's where we are now.
And if you look at players like Emily Windsor yesterday, who actually gave a really eloquent speech, because she was also there to accept an award that was given to the BBC commentary teams, who have done sterling work commentating on both men's county but also women's regional cricket. And she actually said, she hit the winning runs in the 100, and for her to then have to listen to lots of people telling her, oh, the 100 is a total waste of space and we want to get rid of it. How difficult for her. What like an unhelpful thing to hear.
Yeah, I caught her eye when the first comments about the 100 were being made, and she literally slid down in her seat like this.
Careful.
Anyway.
Okay,
moving swiftly on.
Yeah, it was an interesting day. Now, we've got a couple more stories to discuss this week, and they're both actually centred around pay. It's the pay episode, Sid.
Oh, am I getting a pay rise?
You are.
Yay!
You're getting a 30% pay rise.
Yay!
From £0 to £0.
Fair enough.
Congratulations, Sid. Let's talk about these pay rises. So the first one relates to Indian women's cricket. It is, it's generated some brilliant headlines, but basically what it amounts to is not equal pay, it's equal match fees. And that is a really important distinction. Now, obviously, an equal match fee with the men in India is really exciting for the players. However, it does also rely on the women's team continuing to play regular international cricket, doesn't it? If they're playing less cricket than the men, then they're going to be paid less in match fees, as well as their base rate of pay being unaffected. Now, we did talk about this a few months ago on the podcast, because actually the same thing has recently happened in New Zealand. And it was another, basically totally similar situation whereby the cricket board said we're going to pay the women the same match fees as the men, and of course it's brilliant in terms of headlines, and it is good overall, but it's not equal pay.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess the issue here, and we're sort of rehashing an old argument here, but let's go there again. So before we came on air, I went to have a look through Google at all the news headlines about this. And, it's definitely generated the headlines, but almost all the headlines take the kind of the headline case of it being equal pay.
Equal pay.
So, and we've seen from, research that's been done about the way that people consume news media, that the headline is massively influential. People often don't read much beyond the headline, and even if they do, the headline remains the thing that sticks in their head. So people are walking away from this genuinely thinking that the Indian women are now earning the same amount of money, that Harmanpreet Kaur is now earning the same amount of money as Virat Kohli. And, that's just not true, unfortunately. So the key is obviously the retainers and the amount of money that the men make from their marketing. And there's no doubt that the women's salaries are continuing to go up, and they're making more money from marketing. The Indian players, much more than the English players, seem to be making money from marketing outside cricket. So you've got them endorsing cars and face creams and lots of other products, watches.
Cricket in India is very big business, isn't it?
Yeah,
in a way
absolutely.
that it isn't so much in England.
So there is a degree in which those players are catching up with the men in terms of endorsements and things, but still, it's from a very low base, and the idea that this is pay equality, and that all of the people, so many people as well, getting angry on Twitter, going, this pay equality is terrible, as if it was okay, but you're getting angry at something that hasn't actually happened. Yeah, there is no pay equality for you to be angry at. So
goodness knows how they'll react if it ever does actually happen.
Yeah, the misogynists can just chill, guys, because this is not the matriarchy.
It's an interesting time for India in women's cricket, though, isn't it? And one of the things that sometimes concerns me is that these sort of pay rises or pay parity in terms of match fees often comes on the back of a team being successful, and we know that Indian women's cricket, it's been a good year for them. They won silver at the Commonwealth Games. They came quite close to winning the final, to be honest. They also recently beat England in that series here.
I don't remember anything about that.
You blanked it out. They beat England. Didn't know the I series here, so remember that? No, well, they did. And it was obviously a really important win in terms of beating England
seriously, absolutely. For them to get an away win in England is a fantastic achievement.
Yeah, so but what we don't want is for these kind of pay rises or pay equality in terms of match fees to be tied to the success of teams, and that's something. Yeah,
because obviously, literally, only half the teams are going to win in their matches.
I think I've talked about that before. That it should be irrelevant what happens on the pitch in that sense, because Virat Kohli doesn't take a pay cut whenever he loses a match. So that's what I think. Anyway, the other good news in terms of pay is actually closer to home in England, relating to domestic cricket. We've had a big announcement actually yesterday when we were in the middle of eating our desserts at the Cricket Society lunch. So thanks for that. Optimum timing, ECB. £3.5 million of increased investment in women's cricket in England by the end of 2024. The average domestic salary will be £25,000. Other people will have to translate that into their own currency because I don't know enough about currencies, but £25,000. And the total number of professionals, we don't actually know exactly what it's going to be. The ECB have said they're funding 8 contracts per region by the 1st of November, so that's in a few days' time, so effectively immediately. And then by February 2023, they will fund 10 contracts per region, so that's 80 contracts. However, there have been a handful of contracts that the regions have funded themselves in addition to that. So it's kind of TBC whether the regions are going to also are going to keep funding those, or whether they're just going to say, okay, well, we'll take the money from the ECB and that will be that. So that's at least 80 domestic contracts minimum. Obviously, the England contracts on top of that, which is what it's kind of fluctuated between about 16 and 18. So you're talking about almost 100 contracted professionals, women cricketers in England by February 2023.
Yeah, that's fantastic, isn't it? So let's just put some of that in context. We can talk a little bit about the wage stuff. Okay. So that 25,000, it's about halfway between minimum wage and median wage. So it's not a brilliant salary. As I always say, the Porsche dealers are not going to be troubled by too many female cricketers on those kinds of salaries. But it's a way bit more than minimum wage. So that's really good news. Overall, if honestly, things, guys in other countries will have gathered, people that live in this country will know that things have not been great here over the last, over the last 10 years. The economy has sucked for a long time. We've never really recovered from the kind of financial crash, and the impacts of disinvestment and thing are finally coming home to roost. And there's been an economic crisis in this country, and it's going to get worse. And if the ECB had said on the back of that, I'm sorry guys, there's going to be no new contracts this year, there just isn't the money for them, I would not have criticised them. I was braced for it. I was expecting that to be the line that under these difficult economic conditions, it just wasn't possible. So to hear that not just are we getting just a little bit more investment, but quite substantially more investment, which obviously has been pushed through by Claire Connor, towards the end of her kind of tenure as the head honcho there. She's stepping back down into her other role, I believe, when the new guy, and it is a guy, takes over sometime in the next few weeks.
Hasn't he not
possibly already?
Over?
Yeah, not entirely sure. Sorry, but that's all come through at the end of Claire Connor's term.
Yeah.
It's been pushed through, and it's just fantastic news for the women's game.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're doing this, I mean, what are the motivations for this, Raf? Why are they doing this?
Well, I was just going to say that actually it's really interesting because I was looking back at stuff that Claire Connor said in 2019, so before COVID. And she was interviewed because it was the end of the Kia Super League and there were lots of unhappy people around going, what's going to happen next? And she did an interview with Test Match Special on the BBC, and they were asking her, and her statement, and I quote, was, "I want to see a fully professional game by the end of 2024." So what she was saying is she wants all of the domestic cricket to be fully professional by the end of 2024. So to some extent, we're running out of time for that to happen if they didn't introduce extra contracts. So we've got now, 18 months until we need to have that in place if that ambition is going to be fulfilled. Now, of course, COVID happened and that generated a lot of economic uncertainty, job cuts at the ECB, the players taking pay cuts, so the England players, men and women, etc., etc. So, the situation has changed somewhat, but this was always her ambition, and this was always something that she wanted to achieve in the medium term. So not straight away, but she didn't say it's going to be 10 or 20 years away in 2019. She said, within the next 5 years. So I think there's an element of still trying to push for that, actually. I think that the other thing is that actually on last week's episode, I talked about the power of shame as a method by which to encourage cricket boards to invest more in their women players. And I think that has played a role here, actually. It's interesting to me that when they first announced these domestic contracts in 2020, they didn't say how much they were worth. They deliberately didn't say how much they were worth. In the same way, they've never said how much the England contracts are worth. We found out it was 20,000. And we published it. Was it 20,000 or 18,000?
It was 18 originally.
18,000. We found out it was 18,000. We published that figure, so it was out there in the public domain, 18,000. Now, that was nearly 10,000 less than the Professional Cricket Association mandated minimum wage of 27,500 as it was back then. So, I think that and we published that and we said, look, this isn't good enough, ECB. Yeah, it's great, some steps towards professionalism, but really, in some respects, these are only semi-professionals, because can you really afford to do that if you aren't earning the PCA mandated minimum wage? Aren't they going to have to top it up on the side, which a lot of them have been having to do? And we've kind of been banging that drum a bit. Obviously, other people have as well. And now they've come out and said, okay, they're going to be 25,000 average. And so that's really interesting, because for the first time they've published that figure themselves, and they've gone, okay, we now think this is a more acceptable figure for us to wave around at people and say this is what our domestic female players are earning. Now, it's still below the PCA mandated minimum wage, but it's not quite so far below.
And almost all those players, all bar one last year, got a 100 contract, which topped it up by at the very least.
Yeah,
sort of
I mean,
£4,000,
of course, that's an argument that's bandied round. Oh, we have to accept that they're getting more money through the 100. Well, the PCA mandated minimum wage for men's cricketers, though, does not include the 100. So why should ours?
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, but so I think there's a few things at play there. What do you think, Sid?
Well, I think that that the ECB clearly feel that they need to kind of keep pushing forward in order to get to where they want to be. And I think there's two factors that might be driving this kind of behind the scenes. The first is that there's one thing that really motivates the ECB, it's beating the Aussies.
Yeah.
And it was clear last summer, last winter, last Australian summer, that the England team have, if anything, fallen further behind. And God knows what we're going to see. I mean, I don't think we're massively optimistic about the Ashes this summer in England either. I think that Australia are such massive favourites for that.
But we've got Alice Capsey.
We have. Well,
Bingo!
but the Australia are a massive favourite, so
yeah.
That's kind of pushing it. The other thing that is a big deal in this country, and I know that there's similar issues in Australia with different sports, is the impact of soccer. That soccer is, there's so much more money in women's soccer now. The top players in women's soccer are earning like over $300,000 a year. So we hear on the grapevine. Although the kind of the lowest salaries are still lower, the clubs obviously the lowest salaries in professional football are kind of on parity with what people are earning in cricket. But don't forget that means that the very best cricket players are earning what kind of the lowest paid tier of professional footballers in this country are earning. We have to kind of keep pushing, or we're just going to lose everybody to professional football, because that clearly at the moment offers not only a bigger career opportunity, but the opportunity to actually earn some really serious money if you're good enough. Which cricket still doesn't at this stage. So those things drive forward, but overall all good news.
Yeah. The other thing that I think is interesting is the wording of the press release with it's an average salary for a domestic player of 25,000, and I'm just really curious as to how that calculation has been made, because does that mean that some people are going to earn less than that and some people are going to earn more? Because they haven't said it's a minimum wage. Is there, because at the moment what's happened with the domestic regional setup is that the ECB has kind of mandated centrally, well, all of your players will be paid the same, with one exception.
Yeah, well, there's a little bit of an exception here, because what they did was they added a London weighting, as we call it in this country, because life is more expensive in the south of this country because of the way things are. Housing costs significantly more in the south. General cost of living is more. A pint costs you a lot more in the south than it does in the north. So they added some London weighting so that the players in the south got paid a bit more. They've obviously bumped things up a bit more. And 25,000, obviously, if we assume the average when it started was 18, the average is now 25. There clearly has been an overall increase, but it almost certainly means, that there are a load of players that are being paid a whack less, I would guess.
Okay, but that's interesting, because they're slightly obfuscating the detail then. And the other thing is that does this mean that there's going to be some kind of authority given to the regions to be able to pay their best players more, their best domestic players more? If, for example, the Vipers wanted to give, they wanted to give Georgia Elwys a pay rise, or they wanted to try and hang on to somebody who was thinking about moving to a different region, could they then say, okay, well, we'll offer you a little bit more money? Is that what they're getting at here with this average salary figure? I don't know. I just think it's an interesting one. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, shall we wrap up there, Sid?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks for tuning in, as ever. Bye for now.
Bye.